Good evening and welcome to the May 28th, 2024 Tualatin City Council work session. Our first item on the agenda tonight is a regional transportation discussion led by Mike McCarthy and Cody Fields. Welcome.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thanks for having us this evening. We are here tonight to provide you with an update on a handful of key transportation-related issues we've been keeping track of recently. We initially had scheduled this presentation as an update on tolling. However, since the tolling program is halted indefinitely, we thought this would be a perfect opportunity to provide a general update on transportation in the region. But don't worry, I'm sure that tolling or tolls will come up at some point in the presentation at least once. So we're covering a lot of different topics tonight. So if at any point you would like to pause and comment on a specific area, feel free to do that. We can save them to the end as well if you would prefer. So we'll be doing an update on TriMet's current planning efforts as they look to expand on the Forward Together 1.0 plan. We have a quick status update on the county's 2023-2028 MSTIP funding cycle. We have some news regarding Metro's regional flexible fund allocation, as well as an announcement regarding some upcoming Joint Commission on Transportation public meetings. We'll do an overview of the budget message that ODOT staff has been sharing at the regional transportation tables, and then we'll end with a recap of the JPAC trip to Washington, D.C. So, as you probably know, TriMet is currently rolling out its Forward Together plan, which is an effort to restore service post-pandemic and grow service by 30% over current levels. This is a financially constrained plan, so as of now, TriMet has the budget to roll out all the changes and the new routes that are in the Forward Together 1.0 plan. Recently, TriMet announced the next phase of Forward Together, which they're calling Forward Together 2.0. This plan will be financially unconstrained, so really more an aspirational vision for future transit. The purpose is to respond to community desires and help support the goals of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan, primarily increasing ridership and tripling transit mode share by 2045. And the plan could also be used to make a case for additional operating revenue for TriMet. TriMet began scenario planning and performance analysis at the end of 2023 and has been developing a draft long-term MAX and bus service plan over the past several months. Mike and I recently attended a workshop that TriMet staff conducted where they provided a preview of some of the new ideas that they're studying in Washington County. One of the major changes that the city would see is a possible new line running down 124th. However, Mike proposed a potential reconfiguration of this idea, which they seemed receptive to, and I'll let him expand on that a little bit.
So one of the things I was pleased to hear is they seem to be listening, as we've been telling them, not everybody's going to downtown Portland. There's a lot of people from Tualatin going to places like Hillsborough, Beaverton, Oregon City, Clackamas. So we're seeing more, lines going those directions instead of just straight to and from downtown Portland, which I think is a real positive. The 124th line that they proposed would be running up towards the Beaverton area. And one of the things we mentioned was, well, instead of going down to 124th, between the two gravel pits, what if we routed it in through the western portion of Tualatin, like by Lamb, and right by here and some of our other bigger employers as a potential service to them in those sites. And they were very open to that. And I think they may have some connections to someone who works for Lamb, one of the key planners, but they recognize that, hey, this is a great opportunity to serve potentially a whole lot of people. So it would be 124th, and then what we were talking about was coming across Leviton in front of Lamb, 108th, Herman, Teton, Avery, and then south on Boone's Ferry that way as a bus route. And then it would join the 96, basically turning around in Wilsonville and then coming back up and going the opposite direction. So I think that's one positive. I think one of our big issues is kind of getting to the rest of Tualatin and beyond is downtown.
So TriMet will continue finalizing this draft plan over the course of the summer, and we'll go out for public engagement in fall, so we'll keep an eye on that. We'll definitely want to comment on whatever plans they propose for this next phase. At the same time, TriMet's still building out their FX network, which is their high-speed, high-capacity transit. They've had really good results with the FX2 that runs along Division in Portland, and so they want to build out that plan further. So they'll be refining some corridors, and there'll be public engagement for those efforts in early 2025.
So for more information, look at TriMet Forward Together 2.0. And if there are any suggestions that we want to make or things we want to advocate for, let us know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Brooks. So right now, their expanded 76 route's only going to run during, rush hours, is my understanding, in the morning and afternoon, early morning, late afternoon. And then is 96 still going to be limited, not running on weekends? Because with Planbeck Gardens, we really need a bus to go by there.
Yeah, I think we can work on following that 96 question. The 76, I've heard various visions of expanding. Currently it's frequent service to the hospital.
Right, I
And-
meant to Oregon State.
Yeah, and I've heard once an hour from there to Oregon City. I've heard sometimes peak hours. But I think that's something we can let them know if we have a preference.
Yeah, I believe that they would like to look at more frequent service between Tualatin and Oregon City in the draft 2.0 plan.
Okay.
So that's definitely one of their goals, I believe. And in terms of the 96, with the current plan, it'll be replaced by a line 44, which it runs Wilsonville via Mountain Park and Boone's Ferry with a connection to PCC and the Barber Transit Center before going downtown. And they would be running that all the time, I believe, not just on rush hours and during the week, but it is definitely a slower connection to downtown.
Well, yeah, and what I don't understand in that, I like the Wilsonville part, but the rest of that route is, other than the PCC loop, is very similar to the 38 bus currently, so I'm not understanding why they're doubling up there.
Yeah, we can get some more details and circulate that for you.
Councilor Brooks?
I had two questions. One might be basic, but I'm just curious what FX system plan means.
Yeah, the FX system plan is the high-capacity frequent service lines that they're running. And right now, they only have one running on Division in southeast Portland, and it comes every 7 minutes, and it's running a longer articulated bus. So much more frequent service, and they're trying to build that network out and find corridors where they can run the longer buses with super fast frequency
And less stops.
Okay.
and less stops.
And less stops.
And they're trying to make bus feel like a train.
And then I guess my other question is, we got this email about, and I'm not sure if it's this FX system plan, but we got an email saying that there's 3 lines identified that they're going to have more frequent service. But then they never said what it was in the email, so I was wondering if you had clarification on that.
I don't have an answer to that off the top of my head, but I can follow up with you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, can you forward that email?
Yes.
And then maybe if we can take a look into it and try to figure out which 3 they're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? I just want to add on the 96, as many of you know, former City Councilor Robert Kellogg is on the TriMet board. And he has worked a deal, if you will, with TriMet to keep the 96 line alive for another year. It'll be one of the last routes they change as part of their Forward Together. And basically, TriMet's challenge is ridership. If you get people on the 96 and increase ridership, they'll keep it. But if 96 remains the way it is now, they're going to cut it. Because it's not very well, there's not a lot of ridership anymore. People going the direct route into Portland. We all know most people are working from home or driving to Portland. So the challenges for us, or as a community, is to justify the 96 surviving and people taking the 96 to Portland and back. And then on the, there was a second point. Again, Robert Kellogg is going to take Sam Dessou, the head of TriMet, on a tour of our manufacturing industrial area, because he is interested in providing service in there, beyond what Ride Connection is doing right now. And one of the ideas around SEPA and the high school is working with Ride Connection to provide more frequent service or an alternate route up and down Boone's Ferry Road when TriMet isn't running, to pick up those folks along that route. But they're all talking together. I just want to thank Robert Kellogg for doing all this on our behalf in the area as our rep for TriMet. Yeah.
Quick question about what you just said. Would it also affect, if we're talking about the high school students, about the middle school? I see lots of kids take the taxi and all sorts of things at an elementary school, so I know that there's a need at the middle school. Because is there a route that could, I'm just putting that out there,
Okay.
is all.
Because I know Ms. Baca at the high school reached out to
Yes,
me.
yeah.
And she specifically wanted more service, especially for the kids on Bull Mountain.
Yes, I've heard that.
At the high school.
Yeah.
So if there's someone equal to her.
Okay, I'll work on that and get back with you.
Robert will certainly work with them. And
That'd
so
be
will
great.
TriMet.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk about MSTIP. So the WCCC approved the proposed MSTIP 3F allocation recommendation in March. Thank you very much. The total package is for $250 million, and that includes our Herman Road project, which is 124th to Sipel, and then the Herman-Sipel intersection improvements, and that's about a $17.3 million project. This funding package is scheduled for adoption by the County Board of Commissioners at the June 4th board meeting, so we're looking forward to seeing what they vote on at that meeting. One area of concern with MSTIP, the County Budget Committee approved a 5% reduction in MSTIP for fiscal year '25, and this is on top of a one-time 7% reduction from this year, fiscal year '24, and that was about $3.6 million to balance the general fund budget. So WCCC did discuss this at their May 20th meeting. Seems to be consensus that the mayors in Washington County feel that dipping into the MSTIP fund to balance the general fund is a bit problematic. I know Mayor Bubenek's a bit closer if he has any comments he wants to make about.
Could you explain where the MSTIP funds come from?
Yes. So it was a levy that eventually was rolled into the overall county budget. I'm not clear on the timeline of that. Do you know when that was all rolled in?
I think it originally started back in the 80s.
I was approved 3 times.
Yeah, and approved 3 times by voters. And then when measures 47 and 50 came in late 90s, was when it had to get rolled into the county's kind of permanent rate.
Right.
Yeah.
And the understanding at the time was that they were separate and, general fund would be over here, MSTIP would be over here, and they would not be intermingled or shifted, but I think budgets have gotten tighter for the general fund.
So more to come on that. We'll keep an eye on that issue as it develops.
Any other comments?
I'll wait till later.
I think the mayor's moved it.
We have a couple random updates. So Metro is currently developing a program direction for their upcoming regional flexible fund allocation, and staff has proposed issuing a new project bond to leverage discretionary federal funds. The idea is that a new bond would advance the ability to construct projects earlier than would otherwise be possible. So far, there's been a lot of support for this approach, but an exact number has not been decided on yet, so more conversation needed there. This was on the JPACT agenda next week, and members requested an additional meeting to continue talking about not only the bond, but the program direction. They just felt like they needed more time, so we'll continue following that. But at this point, there are a few proposed category themes for a new type of, or new bond funding. That would be high-capacity transit projects, first last mile transit investments, including safe access to transit, and transit vehicle priority investments. We've already heard about some project ideas being proposed and discussed around the region. Mike has one in particular that he's been keeping his eye on.
Well, there's a couple, I think 82nd Avenue is one place where they're looking at for some funding, 82nd Avenue, Portland. And then Hillsboro's also making a push to fund a new bridge for the Max Light Rail over 185th Avenue, just north of Baseline, that they're seeing as a potential candidate for this funding as well. So, and there's a number of other pushes around the region.
More to come, but overall, seems like there's support around the region for issuing a new bond with the RIFA dollars. And then we wanted to let you know that the Joint Committee on Transportation will be holding 12 meetings and local tours around the state to discuss the need for stable and sufficient transportation funding in anticipation of the 2025 legislative session. They have a variety of goals, building understanding of transportation funding challenges, building legislative understanding of statewide transportation needs and priorities, gathering input from the public on what their preferences are. And so there will be opportunities for public testimony at all of these events. If anyone is interested in signing up, we can help you with that. I haven't heard specific locations or times, but we do know the dates for the 3 events in our region: downtown Portland, Tuesday, June 4th, Happy Valley, Thursday, September 26th, and Hillsborough, Friday, September 27th.
On the regional flexible funds, I was in a meeting and they had an example of what that bond would cover, and they had quite a bit, like maybe 65 million allocated for the Southwest Corridor. Are you seeing that, or it's not defined yet?
I haven't seen that proposal yet.
I've heard talk of that. I think, I imagine that'll be some sort of updating design or feasibility or figuring out how to fund it, or things like that after, you know, the recent ballot measure.
So the
Actually, on the meetings.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We don't know if it's going to be set up like the ones for tolling, where basically it's one continuous hearing, and if you testify at one, you don't get to testify at the others, or if it's the kind of thing when someone could testify at, you know, all 12 around the state if they wanted to. So we'll try to figure that part out. I think it's a great opportunity to weigh in on what kinds of solutions we would think, or whoever's testifying would think, are acceptable to ODOT's funding issues.
Which ties in to the next section of our presentation here, which is the ODOT funding and revenue needs. So ODOT staff has been presenting at various regional transportation tables over the last several months, and they're highlighting some anticipated funding challenges in the not too distant future. And really the general message that we're hearing is that without some type of structural reform to the state highway fund, there will be reductions of service in the future. However, they're emphasizing that if the state can come up with a plan for sufficient and reliable funding, they'll be able to prioritize restoring those maintenance services, improving customer service gaps, addressing safety issues, and fulfilling those HB 2017 commitments. So The presentation that I've seen really takes a look at ODOT's budget, and it's essentially split into two specific budget areas. So there's the capital projects, the major construction programs, or projects, and big major paving projects and large programs. And these projects and programs receive directed and dedicated federal funds and state funding, and that's prescribed by statute. So that's really kind of stuck in that bucket. It can't go over to the other side to cover maintenance and operations, which is where they're starting to feel some immediate concern. So that side of the budget covers road maintenance, covers operations of the DMV and the commerce compliance, and central administrative functions such as IT, HR, and contracting and procurement. And these are all services and work that's funded by the State Highway Fund. This is a chart illustrating the overall 2023-2025 legislative budget for the agency, totaling $6.1 billion. And as you can see, over half of the budget is allocated to capital investments. The areas of concern are the slices on the left-hand side, namely maintenance and operations and agency operations that are funded by the State Highway Fund. Come on. There we go. So this is a snapshot of the mechanisms that support the State Highway Fund. So we have the gas tax, motor carrier fees, and DMV fees, including licensing and vehicle registration. And this fund does have some very specific challenges. The agency is seeing a decline in the fuel tax revenues due to fuel-efficient vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and electric vehicles. There's also a rigid statutory structure to this fund, which prescribes how the money is spent, so it all can't just be funneled right into maintenance and operations. There is funding that goes to collection costs. There's the city and county apportionments, which is the 50-30-20 split we hear about pretty frequently, and then debt service obligations. The fund is also reliant on very few sources of revenue, and the state does not utilize, not utilize inflation-resistant funding mechanisms to support transportation needs. So, for example, the gas tax is not indexed to inflation, so as inflation rises, that funding revenue source becomes weaker and weaker with the higher inflation costs, which right now we're seeing a rise in record inflation. So that is definitely an acute problem that is seen across the board. So if everything stays the same as it is today, ODOT will experience some very serious funding gaps in the near future. There is a stated $1.8 billion funding gap just for service functions and safety system investments in the upcoming budgets. And then, of course, the HB 27 commitments, the I-5 Rose Quarter and I-205 improvement projects are seeing pretty sizable gaps as well. And so this is the part of the presentation where ODOT staff lists off some potential options for the future. So we have indexing all of three revenue mechanisms to inflation, some type of road user charge like a VMT, or building off of the Orgo pilot program. Tolling, of course, is still an option if it were revived at some point. They could rely on general fund sources to try to plug some of those gaps. And then, of course, there may be alternative sources that have not been identified yet. And so as we get closer to the 2025 session, these are all ideas that we're going to start hearing about on a pretty regular basis. And as I mentioned earlier, the Joint Committee on Transportation will be touring around specifically to get ideas from the public and from elected officials on these concepts. And knowing that the city recently finalized a contract with Thorn Run Partners for lobbying services, we kind of designed this section of the presentation just to kind of provide some context to have discussions with their team in terms of what you may want to advocate for or against in the upcoming session. So More to come. One final budget slide. This is the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP, for 2027-2030, and it's broken into multiple categories, but one important note is that almost every category here has seen a reduction from the previous STIP, except for the ADA category, which has increased to ensure that ODOT is meeting its obligation for ADA curb ramps. And there's a small amount of allocation, unallocated funding that they're planning to funnel into the Great Streets program. Overall, budget picture for transportation, challenging, and there are some real needs that we should all be considering as we move towards that 2025 session. And finally, I will turn it over to Mike and the mayor to provide us with any exciting highlights from their recent trip to Washington, D.C. with JPACT.
Before we dive into any comments, questions on the ODOT funding,
You might not know the answer to this, but I'm sorry. But if we had it, if there was a VMT, is there a way to capture people coming over from like Vancouver out of state?
I think that's a very good question that
Yeah.
would have to be figured out through that somehow. Yeah, there's a lot of debate about how, but.
I was just curious about the payment of the debt. I mean, it seemed like a pretty big part of that whole budget, so did you have more insight around that?
I don't on hand. I'm sure that it's various previous bond obligations, and I could dig into that slice of the pie and find you the exact details of what kind of debt obligations that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if they did do something that was big, if they would be able to figure out a way to capture some of it and refinance, because it looks so, like, such a big percentage, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it was a lot of big projects, including a lot of bridge work I got bonded for. A couple opinions I might offer. I actually believe ODOT when they talk about having a funding shortage. Some people talk about they should just cut the fat and meet the budget. But I've been pretty impressed with them as an organization overall. And they've really developed some good, efficient practices. And maybe you could cut 5 or 10% through various efficiency improvements, but there wouldn't be enough that could be saved to change the structural funding issue that just comes from like a gas tax that still is fixed number of cents per gallon. Back in '97, I could find gas for 93 cents a gallon, and 24 cents of that was a state gas tax. And now at 4 something a gallon, I think it's up to 30 that's a state gas tax. And that doesn't match the inflation rate. Why they didn't index it to inflation years back, I don't know. Politics, perhaps. But overall, the funding shortage is there. They do need to come up with some sort of way to enhance revenue to get there. When Cody showed the slide of the table of funding, enhance are all the improvements that we're asking for along state highways that we and other agencies are all asking for. And if you notice, that number is 0 in their proposed 27 to 30 line. And unless some big funding change happens, that will be 0 going forward. And then they're going to start having to reduce things like paving and snow plowing and other things like that. The DC trip, I know you've got a report on that you could be giving later. I thought it was a wonderful show of unity of, I think it was 39 people from 15 different agencies, many of whom are on the screen. Unfortunately, the tall guy always gets stuck in the back of the photos. And this was
Three people are hidden and not me. I like it.
And this was basically a ceremony that the region put on for Earl Blumenauer, commemorating all that he's done for the region. And so we were all wearing our bike pins, and then they had the cookies with the bike symbol on it. It was a great opportunity to meet with some of our key leaders and for the region to thank them for some big investments coming for federal dollars for like I-5 at the Rose Quarter, for the Interstate Bridge, and then to bring up some other funding needs, like a lot of the ones that we've been hearing about. And I think one of the other big benefits of it is the conversations we get to have around the room, sort of in between meeting with the senators or Congress people and, various others. We got a lot of great insight into other agencies and some of our partners. So I don't want to steal too much of the thunder from your report later.
Well, I sent a written report to council, and it's going to be the same report. It's going to be in Tualatin Life for June, a wrap-up of what happened. But for me, the couple of big things to bring back were how the VMT is a discussion region-wide, and the effort to maybe have the federal government implement a VMT across the country versus states having to stand it up by themselves. It was interesting with our meeting with Senator Wyden. When I brought it up, he wanted to know more and what our ideas were, because his office is kind of interested in it because he's, the head of taxation. And actually, at the Memorial Day event, Rhea Armitage came up to me about it because it's bubbling through the office about VMT. Senator Merkley is a fan of it, as is Congressman Blumenauer, because the number we were told was a big chunk of money from the highway, the COVID-related bills that went through the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act buttressed the Federal Highway Trust Fund by a few billion. And now the economy is good, so they're making serious interest on that fund. But I think it was early 2033, 32, around there, that the Federal Highway Trust Fund will run out of money. So Congress needs to look at this. They don't want to look at this. It's a hot potato, and VMT might be their way out. So every meeting we're in, we're talking about VMT. The other discussions were, just taking care of the basics. The city of Portland, Multnomah County, things that used to be on their capital improvement plan are now maintenance items they can't even address. The amount of road repair that exists in Multnomah County and the bridges is beyond their reach. City of Portland has the same problems. So things that you aspire to as a new project to get federal funding for are now just basic necessities that the cities are trying to figure out. And then finally, it's kind of funny, but the best interaction that Mike and I have ever had with TriMet is in Washington, D.C. We have to go to the East Coast to talk to them because we had, the 3 representatives of TriMet, while we're sitting at, waiting for meetings or at events and stuff, just chatting and getting to know each other and getting the needs of Tualatin, getting it covered, stop. We had, I don't know why we had to travel that far to get it done, but, we had them cornered between Mike and I. And so it worked out well. It's going to be interesting what happens. Of course, the big question was about the interstate bridge. There's still a $4 billion gap. The whole, Washington and Oregon's federal delegation are all for it. It's just a hard sell to the rest of the United States for $4 billion. And one of the questions was, okay, the bridge in Baltimore that was hit by the freighter, is that $300 million, $400 million going to be taken away from the interstate bridge effort? And the federal government said no, and it was interesting was they said it might end up that the federal government doesn't put a lot of money into it because it's a bridge owned by Maryland. It was a tolled facility, and they might be able to assist in it, but they might not get a lot of money from the federal government to fix it. And they're saying it ain't gonna be fixed for at least 10 years. So the mayor, Ann from Vancouver, and Greg from the Interstate Bridge Project were relentless on these folks, but we're talking to the choir here. Their ask was go talk to other representatives and senators through the U.S., friends and family in other states, and bring this up because they're just not hearing about it. They don't know the critical need that that bridge serves on the West Coast commerce and I-5. Did I catch everything?
I think so.
So when the transportation secretary highlights it, that doesn't count?
Nope. Yeah, I think maybe a couple of things I'd mention. One is I heard a real openness to use federal funds for like big picture kind of dream projects, and like things that we could do around our city. So some of the things that could come out of our transportation system plan, there'd be openings for federal funding for it, particularly if it addresses things like safety or eliminating rail crossings, or things like that.
Cindy's overpass. I have it written down.
I mean, the US DOT people were really good listening. And we've got that meeting tomorrow. We're talking about the railroad crossing grants. That amazingly, we got an email, 2 days after we were at DOT about how the grant process works for fixing at-grade crossings. And then the Safe Streets Initiative that is being done in the metro region. So Metro is getting a chunk of money from the feds for Safe Streets to distribute to the cities and counties based on projects. And, we didn't want to, put our own city thing in there. We want to work with Metro. But, DOT is, they brought, 4 people in there. One of the head honchos of the DOT grants is a former employee of PBOT. So she knows the area. She knows what's going on. And they were very open. And, as a federal agency, it was like handing out cards, give us a call anytime. If you need any help with a grant, let us know. So very approachable.
I also left very impressed with our own Oregon's congressional delegation. And, the people that we met with, just knowledgeable, caring, really good staff.
And we got the last minute plug into Congresswoman Salinas for the police department. And hopefully with Senator Merkley for the food pantry, because that came up at the Merkley meeting.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Sacco.
So when talking about the bridge, is there some sort of like strategy that we could get or request of like, this is an email template and these are the states or senators that we should target? And so it's talking about like, we have family members in other states, like what would be the best strategy for that?
Yeah, we can talk to Greg at the bridge project and to Mayor Ann. One of the things they did bring up is the possibility of the states ponying up more money. So right now, Washington and Oregon are ponying up $1 billion each, and that the feds might be more interested if there was more match money. But, who knows if each state has, the extra funds to put into that. There was also the point brought that every day we wait to fix the bridge, it's $1 million more to build that bridge. So every day. So like you're saying, Councilor Sacco, while we're waiting, it's just getting more and more expensive. Well, yeah, we'll follow up with Greg and Mary Ann about, and then our congressional delegation, who are the folks basically on the transportation committee that we need to get a hold of? Good question. Anything else? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the Neighborhood Transportation Safety Program update.
Maybe I'll just stay here.
And Michael, just stay here. And welcome Abby.
Well, good evening. This is Abby McFetridge, Engineering Associate, and she will be managing the Neighborhood Transportation Safety Program, which is a continuation of some of the efforts from the Tualatin Moving Forward program that we're able to use to build a lot of great small projects around the city, a lot of crosswalks with the flashing beacons and small sidewalks and other improvements to help make things safer, easier to walk. And Abby will explain, or give us an update on the program.
Okay. Figuring out how to use this. They made it easy. There's only 3 buttons. Yeah, thank you, Mike. So we kind of had the bond-funded program, the Neighborhood Traffic Safety Program, and now we're moving towards the Neighborhood Transportation Safety Program. So the annual program, it was based on the positive feedback. We've gotten a lot of compliments on it. People really seem to like it. So $150,000 per year is put aside for it. That's from the road operating fund. And then all the suggestions are from, you know, the community based on what they see around there. We're really trying to get the community. We can submit it on someone's behalf, you know, if someone doesn't have the technology to submit it online, something like that. But we're really trying to like hear from the community. And the survey is active, I also wanted to point out. So we're very excited about that. Okay, so.
Just for a frame of reference, the 150,000 a year is about a third of like the amount that was used for Tualatin moving forward. So in terms of your vision for size.
So the annual program, kind of like a typical timeline, obviously we're kind of in a cycle right now. So it would start in the fall, and that's gathering the projects. That's where we really kind of hit like public engagement, you know, that could be like website banners, like just web pages, social media posts, stuff like that. Throughout the whole year, this could be something that, you know, if citizens reach out to, you could refer them to. But fall is kind of the main time where like, hey, we have this program going on. So then we move to winter. That's where I do a lot of the work, going through all the suggestions, filtering through, really diving into the data. Martin in the GIS department, he created a really good survey this year where it's like map-based. So you can like do the point on the map and then I can see them all at once. So I'm really excited about that. And so spring, that's the planning and designing. And then moving forward, summer is the construction of the selected projects. And I put the little construction cone because that's where we're currently at in the process right now. So really excited. Okay, so we have the Tier 1 criteria. So this is created by, we have a project steering team. Mike and I are on it, and then various other staff members. We created Tier 1 criteria and then Tier 2 criteria. So is the project in Tualatin, you know, on a city street? We try to keep it under $100,000 just because we need some wiggle room. We don't want to go over. And then also we don't want something taking up the whole amount. Did you want to add something?
I think you got it.
Okay, I thought you were saying something. And then also is the project within the scope of transportation safety. So this isn't widening I-5, this isn't building a helicopter pad. Well, that seems fun too, but this is, you know, transportation safety, like bike stuff, ped stuff, just general safety things. So the Tier 2 criteria, so we have 4 guiding principles: equity, safety, feasibility, and impact. And then within the 4 categories, the 4 guiding principles, we have individual questions. So this is just helping me going through and scoring. So each of the 4 categories have 5 points for a max of 20 per project. And that's how we went through and score them. We were trying to take like the subjectivity out of it as much as possible. And we decided that these were the things we wanted to focus on. I also wanted to point out the equity map. So this is how like I would award 5 points for a higher equity need and then 1 point for a lower equity need. So impact and safety, these are the questions for the tier 2 criteria for those ones. The table to the left is where we collected traffic counts. So that's mainly for the speeding concerns, getting the 85th percentile speed. And then that was helping me score the safety criteria. So now the fun stuff. 123 suggestions, and this included carryovers from the previous year. When I inherited the program, there was 4 separate spreadsheets that I was combining into one. And then 43 suggestions met Tier 1 criteria and then were evaluated for Tier 2. And so then, based on the scoring that I did and Mike's review, 11 projects were brought to the steering group. And then from there, we kind of discussed the projects and we came up with 3 suggestions that were advanced to planning. So, the three projects that are in planning right now are the Tualatin Road and Herman Road striping and cycling improvements, Saggart Street bridge lights, and then IBAC and Grams Ferry pedestrian crossing, and then with some possible improvements to IBAC and Boones depending on the conceptual design and engineering analysis. Oh, nope, sorry. It didn't go right away. So, does this have a, can I point with this?
Yeah.
Is it, oh, great, okay. Okay, so we're looking at a possible crossing across Grants Ferry either on this side or this side. And then we want a complete and safe pedestrian path. So the ideal route is kind of like this, prioritizing, you know, the park over here and then the high school. Just from visual observation, we've seen a very high pedestrian amount. So that's one of the projects. And then the Saggart Street Bridge lights, that one's a little bit more self-explanatory. With the recent pedestrian path that was put on the north side, we're just looking to make it even more safe with lights. And then the Tualatin Road and Herman Road striping and cyclist improvements. So specifically with the westbound movement, and then even more specifically, the right turn here, the bike lane disappears in this section. You probably can't see it from here. The bike lane drops here and then it picks up right here. So those making this right-hand movement, it's a little bit unsafe with, they're not exactly knowing where to go. And then there's also a conflict point right here with those turning right or left. So we're just looking at general improvements to this area. Oh, that formatted a little weird. Are there any questions, comments, suggestions? Also, if Mike wants to add anything.
Well, here's just a couple examples of some previous projects
Yeah.
that were completed with the program.
Questions? Councilor Brooks and Councilor President Pratt.
Thanks for the presentation and the work and combining all the spreadsheets. I had one question that was a really basic question. We're talking about pedestrian and bicyclist safety. Is there any room also for if there was common traffic accidents for cars, or is it just bicycle and pedestrian?
I think it's all safety.
All safety, okay.
I don't think we've gotten a suggestion from the community based on that yet. So I don't think we've had to deal with it yet, but I think we're open to it.
Okay, I just didn't see it in the language, so I was just making sure. And then I was wondering if there's a way that this program abuts with the Community Development Block Grant programs, or what is it, which one is it? The one for safety that goes with pedestrian and bicycle safety through the county?
Yeah, so the Community Development Block Grant Program, they're a little different because that one is federal funding through the county. So that introduces federal funding requirements. And what we're hoping to do with this program is to really make it nimble so we can get things done fairly quickly and efficiently. So my concern with combining the two would be that we'd bring the federal requirements to the local funding. And so we wouldn't be able to be as efficient if we did that. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity to leverage one of the other. So we'll be looking for those opportunities while not trying to add federal requirements to local money.
Okay. Yeah, I just think, just as it's become less competitive for us to take a hold of some of that money and that we can do it pretty quickly, turn around, that I just don't want to leave it off the thinking, especially because these fit really well into those criteria too.
I think particularly some of the projects that are a little too big for this program could fit really well for the CDBG program.
Okay, so
If
it could help farm information for those other opportunities.
If something doesn't fit with this program, we don't just throw it away. I have kind of a system, refer to parks, refer to police, like they don't just get like disregarded. So if there was a project, like Mike said, we could keep it on the list and then look for other funding.
Appreciate it, thank you. And then I have a question that's not about this, but makes me think about it since you're here, Mike, about is there anything that you can think of? I just was thinking about that big traffic accident on ramp for the freeway the other day, where you're getting on to 1210 Sherwood Road from going north on I-5.
Yeah.
And that line curve is there, so I was just curious if you had any thoughts about that spot.
Yeah, it was, hard to hear about the crash. I think
Yeah.
that sounded terrible. And I know the state's taking a closer look at it. I think one of the concerns is with the loop ramp to the left, and then you're coming to the north. I believe there's a flashing, kind of a red light up sign that the state has there that would say like, stop vehicles ahead. Getting the incoming driver to see that and understand it seems like, maybe the issue. I haven't seen the crash report yet on this one. So,
I'm sure that person was flying. I wasn't sure if there's a mirror there. I couldn't even remember. But I just was thinking about that, and I know that you have good ideas, so I just thought of you. Anyway, that's it.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can check in with the state on what action they're taking on it.
be good. Thanks for all the work.
Councilperson Pratt.
So my question is specifically on that Ibach and Grams Ferry crosswalk. And it looks like it's not included, but are you looking at that right after, on the east side, I think it's Grams Ferry, just past the LDS church, there's about a block of no sidewalk.
I think that's
But the
county
property
owned.
has like a little like stormwater runoff, like right close to the road, but it's just like one little piece there, so. Because you have to kind of cross the street or walk on that narrow edge when you're,
Yeah. I think that is something we could take a look at as part of this project.
okay, yeah, I don't know, I mean, that's not a lot of funds to cover all these projects, so.
Yeah, the city-county jurisdiction line is just a little bit to the southwest of where Ibach and Grams meet,
Oh, okay,
and I'm not sure,
yeah, this
forget
is
where that's
just
specific,
past that, I think it's the LDS church on the, and then just past that it stops, just for like one property.
yeah. Yeah, I think we can look into it. I think
Okay,
we can see, I think it may be on the county side,
okay,
and there may be talk about future development that would have to do it, but no sign of a development coming in that location.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Other questions for Councilor Sacco?
Thank you for the presentation. I went to go to the survey and it says access denied, so I don't know if there's like a link that's broken or something.
I ran into the same thing. I was asking some other staff about it, and did you go through like Google or?
I went through our website.
Okay, well, there's been some issues with like it not linking properly, so I can send out a link that I know works, but yeah, I've been trying to figure out.
Okay, might be something that we want to look at, make sure that we're getting all the feedback. That wasn't my
Yeah.
question. I just happened to go on there to see if everything was in English and Spanish, and it is, so thank you for that. And then, but my question is on the equity side. I don't know how many suggestions we've gotten thus far, but when they do start coming in, I know that we're scoring based on the equity map, which is great. But do we know how many we're getting for those equity areas versus the non-equity areas? And again, as they start coming in, I'd be interested to know, although they're being scored higher, I get that, but do we need to do more outreach in those areas to make sure that we're getting the feedback from those areas?
Now that it's a web-based survey, it'll be much easier for me to see, and I can kind of line up the equity map with where they're at. I wasn't really able to do that with, the 123 that I was going through, but it is something that we can look for and then evaluate.
Yeah, I just think it'd be interesting to see if we need to do more outreach in those areas as opposed to other areas to make sure we're getting all the feedback. As you said when you first started, there are people that don't have access to these types of tools, and to make sure that we're getting all the feedback that we need to be successful.
And I think that's something that we can really look at during the fall, during like the solicitation period. And then now that you brought it up, I am really curious to look at the map. So once we make sure that the link works.
Other questions? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you for the presentation and the information. I've had a couple emails come my way. I'm more so asking if we can include other speed bumps in certain areas. Do I just forward that over to you? How do we deal with that? I know that we're continuing the Tualatin Moving Forward program, and we're considering small projects like that.
So you could just refer them to the survey once we make
Yes.
sure that the link works. I think I had sent it to Sherilyn and Megan at some point. So the link worked when I sent it to you guys. You can forward them to us, but I think it would be easiest for them to fill out the survey, and then they can write exactly what they mean.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
So was your question also that would we consider speed bumps as a solution from the suggestion? They're not off the table. It's not a hard no.
Sorry, I missed that part.
No, my understanding is they will be evaluated and considered, that suggestion.
I think one of the steps that Abby mentioned is that we get traffic counts and speed measurements. Because we get a lot of speeding complaints, but the volume of the complaint doesn't necessarily match the actual speed of vehicles on the road. So part of what we do is, we actually try to get data about what level of speed are we seeing. And actually, it's lower than I've seen in a lot of other agencies. So I think we're pretty blessed that way. But that's something that we do check to try to get to some real numeric observations.
So when we're clarifying, there's a portion of Tualatin that's Clackamas County, which is the Southwest Nyberg Lane Road that goes to Southwest 50th. Whose jurisdiction does that road fall under? Is it Clackamas, or is it Washington County, or is it Tualatin? That's a gray area, and that's just so
Nyberg Lane is Tualatin's.
Tualatin all the way through the stop sign that goes out right along Boone's Ferry Park, that whole road.
Correct.
Browns Ferry.
Correct. Yeah, that's all Tualatin's. And really the only Clackamas County road that we have now is the eastern half of 65th Avenue.
When I had called to adopt the road for the trash cleanup, when I attempted to adopt that road right there, no one could tell me who I can go with to do that with. So that's why I was asking that question. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to adopt that road to clean up the trash, my wife and I, my family, and we called Clackamas County first and on the road program, and they couldn't give me directions, and at the time I called Washington County, but just check it.
Well, that's partially probably because we don't have a trash cleanup program for the city of Tualatin, correct?
I'm not aware of one.
Yeah, we don't have one for the
Ridgewood
city of
Burton.
Tualatin, but Washington County and Clackamas County do on their roads, their jurisdictional roads. So if it wasn't in their, if it's a Tualatin road, not a Clackamas County road, they wouldn't be able to, refer you, and we don't have such a program. We'd love it if you'd pick up trash, though.
Can I just say something about that, too? Okay. I know for me, we've done trash pickups, and we've coordinated with the volunteer program with the parks, with Jackie Conan, and started at the park and then made sure everyone was safe, but that's one way that you can do it. You're not going to get an adopt a road sign, but it is a way of working with the city. So there is ways to do that, and we, like Council President Pratt said, she didn't know that she could have so much fun picking up trash in the rain. Yeah, it's fun.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you both for your update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to our agenda review and roundtable. I have Counselor Sacco for Pledge of Allegiance. And then we have two announcements, one for gun violence awareness and Pride. I know Kristen already said she wanted Pride. You want to do gun violence? Okay. That's done. Any questions on consent agenda? All right, that's easy. So with that, I'll move along to the council roundtable, and we'll start with Councilor Sacco.
Thank you. On May 17th, the Subcommittee on Council Rules met for the third and final time, I believe. We completed all the updates. Thank you, Kevin, for all your work, and appreciate all the guidance and assistance you provided us. We did unanimously agree to have Kevin come to an upcoming work session to just give you everybody an overview of what all the changes were, and I believe that's coming up on the 24th of next month. And then May 20th, I met with the IDEA Committee. The committee completed their mission statement, reviewed proclamations, and touched on potential projects. So starting to get things moving. So really excited for the work that they're doing there.
Councilor Hilliard.
Thank you. Other than the Subcommittee on Council Rules, I have nothing else to report.
Councilor Hilliard. Councilor Reyes.
No formal meetings in the last couple of weeks, but I did attend the memorial service yesterday, and it was pretty nice. I really want to thank everyone and our members who have who participated. Everyone, it was a really great experience, and getting to know the community and having the picnic was a pretty awesome experience. So thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez.
There hasn't been any formal meetings. I also wanted to thank our Parks Department because they really stepped up and made things made that whole event very easy for the person organizing, and he walked up to me and make sure you let them know that. It was very accessible on the permitting side and things like that, and bathrooms as well, and cleanliness, and everything was just wonderful. It was very touching to see the veteran. So thank you for everybody who participated. That was just amazing. Even the barbecue was amazing as well. Plenty of hamburgers. No one ran out of anything this time around.
Councilor Brooks.
I can't find my button today. All right. We actually, Councilor Reyes and I were both at the Midwest CIO meeting, and it was a good meeting. Mike McCarthy was there and talked about transportation. We had the fire department there, the police department, and then we updated on the summer programs and other city initiatives that are going on. One interesting thing from that meeting that I found interesting was that the fire department has changed their foam retardant because of PFAS, and they're working on clothing. They're kind of getting in, and I just said, how do you feel about that? And they were so enthusiastic because, as you might know, we have the law enforcement and fire department that have shorter life expectancies, and the fire department's cause of death is more likely to be cancer versus other issues that we've talked about with the police department. So I thought that was interesting. We also, I was at the Memorial Day event, which is a really nice event. It was interesting this year to do it in a different location. I was thinking about it as we were talking about traffic improvements, because I've never really done the walk from Community Park from the Lake on the Commons to Community Park with community like that before. So we're all crossing at the beacons, and it was really nice. And walking, I could show people these paths that they might not necessarily think of. And of course, all of to honor everyone who've made the sacrifice, and to hear people's personal opinions. and experiences. You know, the guy that was the main speaker, he was pretty much choked up the whole time. It's such an emotional day for people that have walked through losing a lot of people that they served with. And there's a lot of Vietnam veterans right now that, you know, feel a certain way like that. And I think that also it's a really meaningful thing to be doing in our community. So I really enjoyed that event. It was great. And then I just wanted to say we didn't have the Tualatin Arts Advisory Committee. We will be having it again next month. Some of the other things were canceled, but the water consortium's coming up. There's going to be a speaker that's also covering PFAS at that quarterly meeting. And then finally, for the PAB, in July, we will be celebrating I think it's the centennial of the Community Development Block Grant. I have to make sure. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. There's a half-day program, and I'll bring more information as the time gets closer, but just putting that on your horizon as you think about those things. Thank you.
Council President Pratt.
Last Wednesday, I attended the C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting. We talked about a lot of the transportation stuff we already covered. What I found really enlightening, though, was that Metro came with a draft of the urban growth report, and it's a projection out to 2045. So they're projecting 145 to 195,000 new housing units will be needed. And what was really interesting to me is Metro's looking at only allowing for urban growth expansion for 15,000, so less than 9% of that total. The rest they want through densification and redevelopment. And the other thing that was super interesting was that by 2045, they estimate that 65% of our residents in the metro area will be 65 or older, and another 28% will be 45 or older. So that's huge, you know, we're losing young people drastically, and they said that will mean a lot of people, you know, people over 65 are on fixed income, so that will be a need for affordable, smaller housing. And I did in honor of former Councilor Grimes, I did my push for putting in housing for seniors that it takes that into account, because what we see is townhouses with lots of stairs, and it's really difficult for people. Then on Thursday, I got to go to 12th Elementary and read, have you heard of a Gruffalo, I believe? It was a really cute book. They let the kids pick where they went, though, and the firefighter next to me was giving out stickers and hats, so I wasn't the most popular person.
Gotta get some swag from the police department.
Yeah, should have thought of it. And then the mayor went with me to hear Commissioner Harrington's budget proposal, and yeah, it was a small, intimate group, let's say, but it was fascinating, and their budget book, you know, we're all going to meet tomorrow, but their book was tremendously huge, and the process, it made me so appreciate our budget process in the end, that, you know, we have the departments talking to each other, and the presentation, you know, ours is very clear cut comparatively in my mind. So it was but it was a really interesting meeting, and to learn, you know, the complexity that occurs at the county level.
And how big is their budget?
2.1 billion.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. Then I also went to the Memorial Day celebration, and it was really, it's always touching to go and remember the people that sacrificed for all of us to have our freedoms. And my favorite part's always, there's always someone that'll tell you their story, and I so appreciate it and getting to hear it. You know, it's great. So that's it for me.
As you all know, I was out of town the 13th to the 16th in Washington, D.C. for JPAC. Came back on the 20th, and the key leaders get together for Communities That Care. That was a great meeting, and sorry to see Dr. Sue leaving as chair, wondering who's going to step up, but I guess that's Cindy's issue. To cajole someone into being the chair. Later that day, we had the Metro Mayors Consortium Housing Subcommittee meeting, and the focus for the MMC, as is the region's mayors, is the proposal that Metro is floating to put a bond on the November ballot that will alter the supportive housing services bond that already exists. It's two-pronged. They're looking to either extend it another 10 years or make it permanent. They haven't decided yet. But what is getting the county chairs and the mayors in a tizzy is they want to be able to have the authority to use the monies collected under the supportive housing services measure to go to capital. And that is terrifying the three county chairs as well as the mayors and a great deal of the service providers under the supportive housing measure, because obviously a facility will cost millions. And if they do multiple facilities, that's multiple millions that will be sucked away from the supportive housing services that we are having right now and into the future. So it's a discussion that is ongoing. It's under analysis at Metro right now. The mayors and want to be more involved. There's only 2 mayors involved that were asked to be involved, which is kind of miffing mayors. And then the 3 county chairs, as it stands right now, I understand they are not super supportive of this change, which is interesting. We all are commenting on how rare it is that the 3 county chairs agree on something. So that's, to come. So there's going to be the Metro Mayors Consortium is having a special meeting with President Peterson to talk about it. If you're able to go to the Metro meet and greet in Gladstone, that'd be a great place to start talking to our Metro representatives, because our Metro counselors are not listening. That's my opinion. I've talked to ours, not listening. So we need to advocate on behalf, depending on how you feel, on either Metro being a little bit more open to and flexible on what they want to put on the ballot in November, or listen to the supportive housing services partners who are in dire fear they're going to lose a chunk of funding going into the future. That is needed big time. Then later that day, was a busy day on the 20th, as Mike mentioned, and Cody, the Washington County Coordinating Committee, MISTIP, majority of the mayors voiced their opposition to the transfer of $2.5 million out of the MISTIP fund into the general fund. A significant amount of funds were also taken out of the Washington County Library Services budget. Their specific earmark, if you will, or their levy was moved into the general fund. I am trying to organize a meeting between the mayors and the commissioners to discuss looking forward, looking at next year, so we can avoid this disagreement. I'm waiting for folks to get back to me since it was a holiday weekend. I've had quite a few mayors reach out saying they will come to the lunch, but only 1 county commissioner has responded. So we'll see. Today we had the Clackamas County mayors met again to discuss Metro, the Metro Supportive Housing Initiative. Again, most of the mayors are getting more information, and they're looking like obviously a lot of the Clackamas County mayors are going to attend the Metro meet and greet to talk specifically to Councilor Lewis to see where she's at, as well as President Peterson, if she attends, and Juan Carlos. And I encourage you, if you have a chance, to talk to Garrett Rosenthal to get his opinion, and if you want to read up and learn a little bit more about this, where Metro's standing. As far as the budget for Washington County, it was an interesting meeting. The $2.1 billion, and what's interesting was a lot of their funds, kind of like ours, but a lot more money, is pretty much, they have no flexibility on. It's directed spending. I think, wasn't it like only 300 million of it was like general fund. They had a little power over, which is not much. Learned today, as a result of the election, that Mayor Fitzgerald cannot be mayor again due to their term limits. The term limit initiative passed. Her 43 days as an appointed office counts as 4 years in Wilsonville, based on what was passed last week. So she is done in December. So impacts of term limits that people don't, realize when they vote for these things. And then want to thank Jesse Thompson, the VFW, and the VFW Auxiliary for organizing the Memorial Day event. They did a terrific job. I want to thank TVF&R for the big hook and ladder with the flag on the other side. That would look really cool when Veterans Plaza is open, to have the flag right there. And then finally, just want to remind folks, June 1st, residents of River Park CIO, the community fair will be held from 11 to 1 at the spacing on Jurgens Park, yeah. So if you have some time, it's a fun event. Just you drop in. There'll be, I think, representatives from the police are usually there. Neighbors Nourishing Community has some starch we'll be handing out, so it's a fun little time. So drop in if you can. And anything else? Council Brooks.
I looked it up. It's the 50th anniversary of the Community Development Block Grant, and it will be August 22nd. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay, I'll go ahead and close this work session. We'll start back up with our regular meeting at 7 o'clock.